Welcome to the Art of Therapy. I'm Dr. Warwick Phipps. Together with colleague clinical psychologist Marizaan Koen, join us as we explore not just what therapy is, but how to do it more effectively, helping you deepen your therapeutic skills and elevate your practice one conversation at a time.
It's good again to be back here in our studio and recording again.
Yes, I share that.
Yeah. So just looking back just at our previous episode, so the last time we talked, we started to discuss just the therapy and the differences between a directive stance and a non-directive stance. So the directive stance, being more direct with clients and giving more direct feedback, direct guidance. And then the non-directive stance, being very non-directive. The last time you explained like with the broomstick, having a dance with a broomstick, and assisting the client to really show their preferred style and to help with that, and for them to become visible. And with the visibility, it helps a lot because it gives great containment and relief, but then also is very meaningful for the diagnostic side as well.
I think it's so clear how you've just summarized what we were talking about, and very much that there's a therapeutic benefit just from being in a person-centered relationship, and what can then the clarity and being able to understand oneself in an environment with this deep understanding, no judgment, and it's trustworthy. And then the diagnostic benefit of the client becoming more of who they are, their preferred style, and how does that connect possibly with the difficulty they're encountering, their presenting problem. So yeah, you've summarized it beautifully.
Okay. So maybe today that we would just further explore that and starting to have a look at with regard to timing, when do you know when to be non-direct, and then when do you know when to be direct, and when do you switch, and how do you do it?
That's an important consideration. And it's one thing to be able to talk about it, but it's another thing about how to, the practicality of when does one come in. So I'm so glad that you've noted that, because it's this, and what we're looking at together is practically with therapy, how to actually how to do it more effectively. So we have to go into the specifics. That's
The
a
how
great
to.
question. Yes, the how to.
Okay.
So, all right, the main principle here about when you come in more directively and shift the posture from a more non-directive approach, given that what we explored last time was that there's no right or wrong, there's no absolute here. It's what impact is going to be. The main principle is when the therapist thinks, or there's an indication that the client is going to need some input, either by way of new information, which helps them understand the possible reality of the situation, or some reality constraint or consideration, so a need for accurate knowledge, or where there's a particular skill that's needed. The main principle here being that to the extent that the individual is adapted and relating effectively within that environment, they will function and experience life very meaningfully. But to the extent that there's a skill or something that is needed that one doesn't have, but is trying to relate in a situation or adapt, and where something is needed but not there to that extent, there's going to be some kind of distress or possible symptom. So, to that end, when the therapist begins to recognize that the client needs some particular skill or some new knowledge and accurate information, knowledge, we've said again, there's no such thing as objective knowledge. What we're talking about is something that's been tested knowledge. And that's why someone comes to a professional, comes to someone with an expertise and training, because they have and have acquired some degree of tested knowledge. So when the therapist anticipates that a new input in the way of information or skill is indicated or needed by the client, because it's always just in their best interests for the purpose of an asocial definition, that's the indication to come in more directively. And that's in the way of an intervention or an input. And once the therapist has done that, then it's to drop back to return to the client-centered, non-directive posture to see what the client does with that and how they're able to relate.
Okay. So to see then, like you say, with the inputs or the feedback, it's when a client needs that skill or needs feedback around it. But then once you've given that, really stepping back again and allowing them and their style and how they incorporate it into the style to become more visible.
Absolutely. That's it.
Sounds very empowering actually for the client.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. It is, and that it's because if we just go back to what we've looked at, in a person-centered approach, it relates to the principle of self-actualization. What Rogers was saying is that when someone is in a relationship where the communication is trustworthy, it's authentic, so they can really trust it. So effectively, it's congruent. That as a therapist, what and how I'm saying something fits or is congruent, and what and how I'm saying it in this context, in our interaction over time, is consistent. It means that what I'm saying is trustworthy. And when that information is trustworthy, that communication, and I'm, as a therapist, conveying an accurate understanding of you or the client, and there's no judgment, the lack of judgment, there's unconditional positive regard, the client begins to experience being understood, accepted, it's trustworthy, and can become more of who they are. So they can give expression to their potential, their fullest potential as a human being, as an individual. And that is the process of self-actualization. So it is so deeply empowering because once someone has the necessary information to be able to cope with a situation or an interaction or a new skill, then from that point of view and that moment on, they can begin relating again more meaningfully and just become more of who they are. And we just now, in a non-directive way, just allow them to just give expression to that. And that's the process of self-actualization.
It sounds so simple, yet so complex.
It is.
Yeah.
It is so. Yes, the idea is so clear and simple. The application of it is it's very nuanced. But that's you're a very experienced therapist, and you understand something of that. It's so easy and yet so complex therapy.
So hard.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Also with that, it just it makes me reflect on the power of that, because it's again, it's giving the feedback that's directive and then stepping back, which means that you're in the client's frame and seeing what they do. It's again, it's not right or wrong. And if how they apply it and how they incorporate it, if it when it works for them, it works, and then the therapist doesn't have to, they can be non-directive again. So then it's really empowering the client, but with no judgment, and yeah, just helping them to become more visible and self-actualize.
Yes. It's really all about the client, and it's their best interests, it's their development, it's their process of becoming more of who they are. And that's something about the art of therapy, just that nuance, that balance of when to come in more directively and when to just withdraw and for the client's sake, so that they can become more of who they are and experience that process of self-actualization.
Yeah. I'm excited for the next one and to just going deeper and deeper into this.
I share that. I'm really looking forward. There's so much for us to look at. So in a sense, we pause here.
Yes. Yeah.